In recent decades, recreational cannabis use has become a part of daily life for many Americans. For some, this development is a signal of a more accepting society, but for others, these lax attitudes have been viewed as a symptom of a society in decline. With cannabis policy rapidly changing, many believe that Pennsylvania may be the next state to legalize recreational use. Today, we'll be navigating the current and potentially future legislation, coming up soon on Outside the Box. I'm Bobby Brenner. With me today is my co-host and fellow ComArt student, Andy Dean, and today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Executive Director of Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition, Meredith Buettner. So, to start, can you give us a quick rundown as to what the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition is?
Sure. Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition is an industry association for the cannabis industry here in the Commonwealth. We represent grower processors, dispensaries, ancillary businesses in the Commonwealth's medical marijuana program. We work on advancing and modernizing the medical marijuana program, as well as advocating for the advancement of comprehensive adult use cannabis policy here in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so as Executive Director, what is your role in all this?
Sure. So my role is everything, right? So here at PCC, I am the administrative person. I am the spokesperson. I'm very involved in government affairs and regulatory affairs, and I spend my days doing all of those jobs to try and advance policy on behalf of both the medical program and then also trying to legalize cannabis here in the Commonwealth.
So can I ask, how exactly did you get involved with PCC?
Sure. So I have a background in politics. I spent a decade doing campaign operations and political fundraising in southeastern Pennsylvania. And this opportunity came up to be the executive director of the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition. It was something that I felt very strongly about. Not only do I think cannabis should be legal for adults to use at 21 and over at their own discretion, but I also believe in the safety and the safe access that comes along with regulated policy, as well as I've had some personal experiences with folks who have really benefited from the use of medical marijuana, whether it is to curb their alcohol use, or it is to solve nerve pain or seizure disorders. I had a lot of folks in my life who benefited greatly from the use of cannabis as part of their medical treatment, and I wanted to make sure that I took part in improving that program for them.
Okay, so Pennsylvania seems like it very possible might be one of the next states to legalize recreational use. Do you think there's any kind of deciding factor that will kind of initiate that process of whether we will, or rather when we will legalize recreational use?
Sure. So I think the public sentiment is there, right? We've seen polling come back. More than 2/3 of Pennsylvanians, sometimes the numbers are even higher than that, support adult use policy. Right now, one of our biggest challenges is we have a split legislature. We're the only split legislature in the country. So the Republicans control the Senate, the Democrats control the House, but barely control the House. They only have, a 1 or a 2 vote majority depending on the day and where we are with special elections and things like that. So, you have to have the right political environment to do it. Additionally, I think the influence of 5 out of 6 of our neighboring states having adult use cannabis is pushing the legislature in the right direction. And then I think just this week, the federal government's announcement that they are going to be rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, I think will provide an impetus for the legislature here in Pennsylvania to act. So I'm not sure what will be the tipping point, but all of those things are bringing the tipping point really close. But you do have to remember the political realities of a split legislature. And I think it's important to talk about the fact that that the Democrats have not had a majority in either legislative body for a very long time. So now that they have a majority, they have a whole series of priorities that they need to get through. And while I do believe that cannabis is one of their priorities, we as a country and a Commonwealth have big issues to deal with. So we've got to make sure that we're providing all of the other kind of, positive influence to make sure that cannabis is at the top of their list.
Low-level drug offenders make up a large percentage of incarcerated criminals, like juveniles, people of color, low-income backgrounds. So what would be the positive impact of legalization on that kind of situation?
So our organization supports comprehensive adult use legislation that would include the decriminalization of cannabis, right? So possession of cannabis would no longer be illegal. We certainly support automatic expungement and review of sentences. So I hope that the impact would be that folks would have their records expunged as automatically as possible. And also hope that those that are serving sentences related to cannabis would see some relief, and folks that are serving sentences that have been, upgraded because of cannabis charges would also have their sentences revisited. So overall, legalization will have a huge impact on those folks, and I think is a really important reason for us to look at doing this, right? There's been some sentiment that maybe we should just decriminalize and basically legalize possession, but that isn't necessarily going to help the folks that are already experiencing criminal justice ramifications from previous offenses, right? So we have to do all of it at one time to make sure we have the greatest impact, which is why we support a comprehensive approach to adult use legislation.
So following that, what would be the effect of recreational use of marijuana on public health issues?
Sure, so I think that there is still a lot of ongoing research on this. I think overall, the one important thing to remember here is that by legalizing, you're creating safe, regulated access, right? So the products sold in a regulated market are subject to state regulations, which here in Pennsylvania, our current regulations in the medical marijuana program include robust testing. And we advocate for a adult use program that would also include significant testing of products. That way we can ensure that patients are ingesting medicine and cannabis that in an adult use market that is safe, that's free of pesticides, that's free of heavy metals, and has been processed in a clean and safe environment. So one of the biggest public health impacts is that you're making sure that what consumers are consuming is safe. Right now, if folks are buying on the illicit market or are buying products that are sold in gas stations, they have no way of knowing what's in those products and no way of knowing if they are safe. So overall, the biggest, I think, public health impact is consumer safety. There have been concerns about things like cannabis being a gateway drug, etc. We've seen that debunked over and over again. Just recently we saw one of the JAMA, the Journal of Adolescent Medicine, I think is the acronym. We just saw them come out and say that teen use does not increase when we see legalization. So I think there's a lot of work being done to dispel some of the public health myths, I would say. But also, I would share that I think legalization is a way to make sure that our public health entities have the resources to deal with any cannabis-related issues, right? So right now, folks are using cannabis. We know that. Whether they're using it in the medical program or whether they're purchasing it on the illicit market, folks are using cannabis. But right now, we're not necessarily providing public health officials with the resources that they need to deal with any problems that may arise. So with a piece of comprehensive legislation, we could make sure that those public health agencies are as well resourced as possible.
So you mentioned about introducing a tax on the sale. How would legalizing adult use kind of change the Pennsylvania economy?
Sure. So right now, Pennsylvania's medical marijuana program has the 7th most cannabis jobs of any market in the country. We have almost 25,000 people here in the Commonwealth working in the cannabis industry. So an expansion of that industry will surely create jobs, and they are good family-sustaining jobs. We pay well above minimum wage, and in a lot of the communities that we operate in, our salaries are some of the highest in the region where we operate. So that's something that I'm really proud of, and something that will advance the Pennsylvania economy for sure. A lot of research shows that a dollar spent on cannabis has a 3-fold impact, right? So when you're purchasing cannabis, you're supporting a job, another job, you're also supporting a packaging supplier, a delivery service, and things like that. So we have, it's a 3 times impact, which is really great and important for our economy as well. And then additionally, the legislature is always looking for ways to raise new revenue without necessarily raising taxes on all taxpayers. And when you tax something like cannabis, you're only taxing the folks that are choosing to participate. And when you talk to cannabis consumers, they really are seeking safe, legal access to cannabis, and therefore agreeing to participate in being taxed, right, and sending revenue back to the Commonwealth. So it would give the Commonwealth the opportunity to fulfill some of their financial goals, right? I think some of the funds need to be reserved for running the cannabis program and ensuring enforcement, ensuring public health, ensuring public education, right? But we anticipate that the revenue will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and would leave the Commonwealth some cushion to put that funding towards programs as they see fit, invest it back into communities, and really the legislature would have the opportunity to really determine how they want to see those funds spent. Right now, I would tell you that the medical marijuana program is putting about $30 million a year into the general fund. So already having a pretty significant impact. And right now we don't tax medical marijuana patients on their retail purchase. We only tax cannabis on the wholesale transaction. So when we get to adult use, you have an opportunity to either continue that wholesale tax plus add a retail tax, or shift the tax to the retail side. And that really will be up to the legislature as how to see they do it. I would share that the one thing I think is really important when we talk about the tax rate is to consider the tax rate of our neighbors. So New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Ohio, Delaware is probably going to come online. I think we'll probably beat West Virginia, but we'll see. We want to make sure that our tax rate is competitive with those other markets, right? We want our folks that go to the Jersey Shore for the weekend to not be buying their cannabis there. We want them to be buying their cannabis here in Pennsylvania and supporting our economy. So we need to make sure that as we consider a tax rate, that it's as competitive as possible, to make sure that consumers are shopping here.
So you would say there's a benefit to the overall population with legalization, not just people who are using, like it's going to benefit everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the job creation will benefit everybody. The 3 times per dollar multiplier obviously benefits everybody. And then the tax revenues certainly benefit the population, as a whole. I think it's always the goal of the legislature to, again, raise revenue without raising taxes. So if the cannabis industry and legalization can be part of that, I think, as a Pennsylvanian who pays a lot of taxes, I think that's a pretty good win.
All right, so you mentioned earlier Pennsylvania, or the federal government is considering changing the status of marijuana, making it a Schedule III drug as opposed to a Schedule I. So would that have any kind of consequences on Pennsylvania's future drug policy?
Sure, absolutely, it will. So moving from Schedule I to Schedule III at the federal level indicates that the government is saying that there are medical uses for the drug, and that it has a low propensity for abuse, right? So that alone brings a lot of support to our medical program. It will increase the ability of folks to do research on cannabis, which is not only good for medical patients, but it's good for consumers, it's good for public health, right? And being able to federally support research is where a lot of the roadblocks have been with cannabis, because its Schedule I status prevented us from doing widespread research on it. Additionally, for cannabis operators, it means a big change to how we are taxed as operators. So right now, we are taxed like illegal businesses. So despite being legal here in Pennsylvania, the federal government still treats us as illegal businesses, and they charge us about a 70% effective tax rate. So for every dollar, they're taking 70 cents, right? So that has a huge impact on our businesses. So the relief from that tax burden will allow operators to reinvest in their businesses, hire more folks, hopefully help reduce the cost of medicine for patients. So we'll see some impact immediately. Not quite immediately. We have to go through the federal government's process, and we know that can be slow, but it's the closest to relief we've ever been. What it does not do is decriminalize or correct any of the wrongs from the war on drugs, right? So those folks that we were talking about with those simple possession charges, etc., they will experience no relief from that. So our work isn't done. We need to keep moving. Ultimately, we need cannabis completely taken off of the CSA. What happens in Pennsylvania is a little bit dependent on Pennsylvania law and how they react to a reclassification at the federal level. And there's some discussion going on in the Judiciary Committee right now about if the state should automatically reschedule when the federal government does, or if it should have to go through a process. And right now, I believe that the Secretary of Health can basically automatically reschedule when the federal government does. And we certainly hope that that will happen. But I think it's important to acknowledge that rescheduling does not mean our work is done. Cannabis is not legal, and those criminal justice impacts will not be felt. And I think that's really important, not only as an industry advocate, but as a cannabis advocate in general, that I make sure I acknowledge.
Some critics claim that cannabis use can cause, dangerous, negligent behaviors. It could be like a gateway drug to other harder drugs. Is there any validity to these arguments?
Cannabis is in fact not a gateway drug. And we're also seeing, as I mentioned, there was a JAMA study that came out a couple of weeks ago that indicated it does not increase teen use either, right? So right now, unfortunately, there are negative impacts from illicit cannabis products, right? They're mixed with things that they shouldn't be mixed with. There's heavy metals, there's pesticides, there's products sold in gas stations that we don't age gate for. So folks who, shouldn't be using those products that are underage are using. And that's really where the danger and the negative side effects are. When you're selling a safe, regulated, legal product, you have a lot more room to control the negative impacts. And again, legalization can provide the resources to public health officials, governments, to make sure that if there are any potential negative impacts on the public, that we have the tools that we need to take care of them.
So, for other people who might be watching this, how would you say say they want to get involved with the legalization of cannabis? How would you recommend they get involved?
Sure, so they certainly can go to our website, pcanna.org, and sign up for our advocacy alerts, and we try to send out information about opportunities for them to get involved. But additionally, I'd say the most impactful thing that your viewers could do to impact the legalization of cannabis here in Pennsylvania would be to pick up the phone and call their state representative and tell their state representative that they, as a constituent, support the legalization here in the Commonwealth. And if your fellow classmates are not necessarily Pennsylvania residents, I'd encourage them to call the state representatives and the state senators that represent your school. And encourage those folks to support legalization. We know from tons of research on advocacy that the best way to influence legislators is for them to hear directly from their constituents. I can go in there and talk to them all that I want, but to hear from somebody that actually votes for them on election day is really impactful. So the best thing that they can do is call their legislature. And we have a tool on our website that can help you identify who your legislature is, or you can just Google PA House of Representatives with your zip code, and it'll find that person for you. So use their website tool that says send them an email here, or pick up the phone and give them a call, and that is the biggest way that folks could get involved here.
Well, that's the end of this episode of Outside the Box, presented to you by theCUBE. I want to thank the LCCC Com Arts Department, and a special thanks to Meredith Buettner for taking time and joining us today. Join us again next episode, where we'll have the facts and the opinions right here on theCUBE. See you soon.